everyone, welcome to HIM 216. Before we get started with the book content for this lecture, I want to make you aware of some additional resources that would be well worth your time to review. We're looking at the course in Blackboard, and I want you to look at course content. So we're going to click on course content, and when we go down, you have a folder that's called additional resources. When we open that up, you do have PowerPoints that are used in the lectures that are listed below. And in each of these lectures, I actually go over specific PCS coding examples. And then following each lecture is an activity. It's like a test. You can go in and do it as many times as you would like, and it is a scenario, and it asks you or a procedure, and it asks you to code that procedure. And you can submit those and see the answer and do those as many times as you would like. And you can see that you can ignore these instructions that say you have 2 attempts. That's not actually the case. You can click on this YouTube link and it should take you to the actual lecture that covers the coding that's in each of these tests. So for instance, you can see that this is MSRO 1. So this lecture covers the medical surgical root operations. This is the first lecture, and then the test for that, or the homework assignment, was MSRO 1 here. And you can see that this is the lecture for MSRO 2, and then we have the MSRO 2 activities, and so on and so forth. So I encourage you to take time to look at these, particularly if there are root operations you're having problems with. These lectures are based on the breakdown of the root operations that you find on 111 and 112 in your textbook. So I encourage you to use those. Hello everyone. For the textbook portion of this lecture, I want you to turn to page 131 in your textbook. We're going to be going over exercise 6-7. I'm going to have you answer some of these questions and submit for this lecture. The others I will actually provide you the answers for. Now, we're in the PCS official coding guidelines, and these questions in exercise 6 are actually asking you to answer questions based on the guidelines. And one of the best ways for you to do this is to actually know where the guideline is. So if we look at number 1, it says, can you choose a valid code directly from the table? And the answer to that is true. And how do we know it's true? Because we can go back to the guideline. We can look at A6 and A7, and these guidelines tell us that we can code directly from the table. Then question number 2, procedures that are performed using an open approach with percutaneous endoscopic assistance are coded to an open approach. And that's true as well. That actually is in the guideline B5.2. Well, maybe it's 12. Hang on. No, it's B5.2, so I'll have to get to B5, excuse me. And these aren't in order by the guideline number. So if we get to B5.2, this is the guideline that specifically tells us that if we have an open approach with percutaneous endoscopic assistance that it's coded to open. So you can get an idea here of what I want you to do when you answer the questions that I'm going to pose for you. So number 3 is the first one that I want you to answer for this lecture, and this will be one of several that I ask you to respond to. Then number 4, a patient's having a hip replacement, a code for the resection of a joint is assigned in addition to the joint replacement code. And that's actually false. The specific guideline that addresses that is B31B. And so if we go to B3, and I'm sorry, this is slower than I thought it would be. This guideline B31B is specifically addresses this guideline, and you do not include the resection of the joint. It's included in the root operation for the definition of replacement, and it's not coded separately. Now let's look at number 5 on page 132. Procedures performed on the distal end of the humerus are coded to the body part arm. And this is guideline B4.1A. And so B4.1A tells us that if a procedure is performed on a body part that doesn't have a separate body part value, we code it to the corresponding whole body part. So there's not a specific body part value for the distal end of the humerus, so we are just going to code it to the humerus. And then number 6, a closed reduction of a fracture is coded to the manipulation approach. And actually number 5 was false. We don't code it to arm, we code it to humerus. And then number 6, a closed reduction of a fracture is coded to the manipulation approach, and this is false. And this is guideline B5.3B. And this guideline tells us that the approach for this is going to be external. So if it's a closed reduction, that means that they are applying force to get that bone back into alignment. They're actually pressing on the arm or the leg or wherever that fracture is, and that approach is external. And then number 7, I want you to answer number 7. And when you answer the questions, tell me where you found the guidelines. So not only whether it's true or false, but where do you find it? Then number 8, body systems designated as lower contain body parts below the diaphragm. And we know that that is true. That guideline is B2.1B. Upper and lower. The diaphragm is the dividing point for that. Then number 9, if the intended procedure is discontinued, code to the root operation that was intended, and that is false. And that guideline is B3.3. If the procedure is discontinued, we code the procedure to the root operation performed. And so the example that they have here was the planned aortic valve replacement. It's discontinued, and they end up coding it to an inspection. Then number 10, if the identical procedure is performed on contralateral body parts and a bilateral part value is available, then you can use a single code. And that's true. That guideline is B4.3. And that's where we find this guideline that basically tells us we can do that. Then number 11 is when used in a code description, the term and means and or. And that is true. We should find that in A10. And means and or. Then for number 12, it's acceptable to use a general body part value when the specific body part value cannot be determined, and that's true. That's guideline B4.1a. And then number 13. I want you to answer that question. Tell me whether or not it's true or false, and where you found the answer, which guideline supports that. Number 14, a temporary post-operative wound drain is considered a device, and that is false. That guideline is B16.1b. How about B6.1b? And that tells us that materials such as sutures, temporary postoperative drains are considered integral, and they are not coded. Number 15. If we have exploration or inspection of a body part that's integral to the performance of the procedure, it's not coded separately. And that is true. That guideline is B3.11a. So here we have that guideline. And then 16, a bone marrow transplant is coded to the root operation transplant, and that's false. That guideline is B3.16. And we can see this includes bone marrow. And then 17, the root operation to stop a post-procedural bleed is control, and that's true. Our root operation for that is B3.7. And then number 18, procedures performed on the skin are coded to the body part system skin and breast. And that's skin, not skin and subcutaneous tissue, but skin. So that's true, and our root operation for that is B4.6. And then number 19, I want you to answer number 19. telling me whether or not it's true or false and what guideline governs that particular question. Then for number 20, the resection of the tonsils is coded to an open approach, and that's false. We know it's coded to external, and that guideline is B5.3a. And the reason is that when we open our mouth, we can see the tonsils, so that becomes an external approach. Now, I'm going to go ahead in this lecture and go over the homework that you have for Chapter 6. And you're answering the true-false questions 1 through 9. You're not answering question 11. We implemented ICD-10 October 1 of 2015. We're currently using ICD-10, so that is just, that's not correct in this book. Then you're answering questions 13. Now, you're answering also 15 and 17. So for 15 and 17, you're going to look up these terms in the alphabetical index and identify the first 3 or 4 characters of the table that the alphabetical index sends you to. So for instance, if I were coding an appendectomy and I put it in the index, then if I look at this resection, this table is 0DTJ. And so the index would get me started with the table. So that's what you're doing for 15 and 17. And then you're going to answer the odd numbered 25 through 37. Now keep in mind, we're coding from the medical surgical section. So all of your codes are going to begin with a 0. If you come up with something other than a 0, it's wrong. So, and I can tell you that all of these questions have one answer except number 35. If you look at number 35, it was a laparoscopic appendectomy that converted to an open. So if it's laparoscopic and it converts to an open, you do have to code both of them. When you're sequencing these, the most definitive procedure is sequenced first. If you have any questions now, let me tell you that for number 29, that's lithotripsy, and there was no removal of fragments. For number 31, Nissen fundoplication, there is no device. So if you have any other questions about those codes, be sure and let me know, and I'll be happy to answer those for you. And that will conclude this final lecture for Chapter 6.